You ever pick up a book that just grabs you and refuses to let go? That's Camp Damascus. This is a book that's gripping, it's thrilling, and it's something that you'll be thinking about long after you put it down. Now, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm not going to give away any plot twists. But this is a book where every sentence feels charged, where the tension just builds and builds within you until all of a sudden, you're completely hooked. From the very first pages, you feel it. The atmosphere, the tone, the way the story just settles into your head. It's one of those books that you fall into. You immerse yourself completely with this world and these characters, and suddenly, time just disappears. What makes Camp Damascus so compelling, though, isn't just the story. It's how it makes you feel. You're on edge. You're curious. You're rooting and you're heartbroken for these characters, and you're thinking about them long after you're done this book. You'll want to stick around for a few minutes as I tell you why this book left such an impression on me, why I think it's worth your time, and why it's one that you'll be thinking about for a long time after you finish. Camp Damascus is Chuck Tingle's horror debut. And if you know Chuck Tingle's name from some of his other works and you're worried about how that's going to translate to something more serious, throw all of those worries and concerns out the window. This is a bona fide horror novel that pulls absolutely no punches, but also carries with it a ton of heart. Camp Damascus is the self-proclaimed most effective gay conversion camp in the country. And it is settled in this idyllic town in Montana called Neverton. And as you go through it with the main character, Rose, you start to find out that maybe Neverton isn't as perfect as it seems, and that the church people that run the town might be more evil than the sin they're trying to stomp out. To quote the back of the book here, Camp Damascus is about the demons that the queer community face in the world and finding the courage to burn it all down. What drew me in immediately was how this book balances real-world horror and psychological tension. This book isn't just scares, gore, or body horror. There is this sense of dread that grows sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, page by page, and you start looking at the church people, the town members themselves, and the rules that they all live under, and it contributes to this sense of both sinister and oppressive weight that you just can't escape. And while it's a horror novel, it tackles some pretty heavy themes that will stick with you. It's about power, it's about identity, it's about manipulation, secrecy, and the way institutions can hide something sinister under a very familiar facade. Reading Camp Damascus is immersive. You feel this tension that seeps in slowly. You start noticing these little parts of sentences that hint at something more going on, but you can't put your finger on it. And it creates this unease. There's these little hints that Tingle drops in it that really show that things aren't quite what they seem, but he won't explain it for a long time. So it just builds this dread as these things just kind of stockpile in your mind as you keep track that these things aren't quite what the town's telling me is true. And it's that sense of unease, that not knowing what's really happening, that keeps you glued to the pages. It's the kind of book where you find yourself going, just one more chapter, even though you know you should have put that book down long ago and gone to bed. And that's the beauty of Camp Damascus. It's not the story it tells you, it's the way it makes you feel while you're reading it. So why does Camp Damascus stick out from other horror novels? It's because it's subtle in its craft. It doesn't rely on cheap shocks, cheap scares, and cheap gore to get you to turn page after page. Every scene, every detail, every sentence serves a purpose. It's that combination of taking that psychological tension that runs throughout this whole thing and the real world horror stakes that make this book so memorable. Horror is at its best as a genre when it is saying something about the world. That's why books and movies that just rely on quick shocks, they don't stick with you long afterwards. And Camp Damascus has so much to say about the real world. It's about identity. It's about finding yourself. It's about having parts of you erased that's out of your control. And it's scary. It's horrifying because this is real. These are things that happen. Kids are being sent to conversion camps and having their identity stripped away from them. And what's worse, these kids are being taught that from the people that love them, the people that are supposed to keep them safe, that their love is only conditional. And when you have that rattling around in your head as you're reading this book, it really ratchets the stakes up, and it shows how horrifying yet how realistic this book is for kids. Camp Damascus taps into that real life horror, and it gives you a story that's incredibly original, scary, and timely, and it is just as much about love as it is about terror. For me, what really sold it was the way it manages to make you feel uncomfortable. It's unsettling, it's thought-provoking, and it's so well crafted that it sticks with you long after you finished reading for that day, or even weeks and months after you finish the book. Tingle nails that sense of foreboding dread that works so well in a horror novel, and he nails it from page 1. And what's really impressive to me, that shows that this is his first horror novel, and he does so well, is not only he gives you foreboding dread, it's that he has the foresight to give you these characters and these depths of characters that are so different from each other. It's really easy, especially in a horror novel, to make your characters disposable. You're gonna kill them off, or you want to make them unlikable so you want to see them get killed. But Tingle bypasses all of that and gives you these fully fledged characters, ones that are separate from each other, have different voices, different feelings, and because of that, you buy into these characters so much quicker. And you fall in love with these characters so much quicker, and because you've bought into them, because you're falling in love with these characters, you feel the horrors that are happening to them, and you feel that happening to you and to people you care about. It's incredible that he's doing this in his very first horror novel. I can honestly say this is one of those books that will leave a mark on you, and not just because of the plot, but because it feels real, because these are real world issues, because you can feel that tension from the page 1, and because he dares to tackle this subject matter and not turn it into a spectacle. This could easily be about queer misery, but it's not. It's about queer love, and that's rare, and that's why I love it. So if you're into horror that's atmospheric, it's tense, but carries a lot of heart, and will leave you thinking about it long after you close that back cover, Camp Damascus is definitely for you. And I want to know, what's a recent book that you've read, whether it's horror or just tense in general, that's kept you up late at night and has stuck with you long after you finished it? Drop it in the comments, let's get some conversation going. And until next time, keep your porch light on.